Hello, everybody, and welcome to the UnWokable podcast. I have not been on in a while. That is because my daughter was born, and she is the most precious thing in the world. And I took off some time to be with her, and man, I'll tell you what, there's nothing that changes your outlook on life like holding your own child in your arms. And it has been an amazing experience, and the last few days of my life have been the best of my entire life. I will say that. But with that comes late nights. And sometimes you just can't get quite back to sleep when you put the baby to rest. So I feel compelled to jump on over, I think, one of the more important things I've missed in my little hiatus, which has been Chris Rufo's complete underplaying of the WEF. And so, what I intend to do in this video or in this live stream tonight is go through his video. And what I am going to do is use Chris Rufo's own arguments against him. Now, I want to say this. I respect Chris Rufo. Chris Rufo has done a great many things for the unwoke movement. I think that's obvious. He is in many ways, for lack of a better term, the poster boy, for good or for ill, of anti-critical race theory agenda, and for many things on the unwoke side of the side of issues. Now, I take umbrage with that designation because I think there are many more qualified people to do that, just from an academic standpoint. But what Chris has is the ability to market. What Chris has is the ability to use a narrative to pinpoint arguments, and he looks real good on screen. There's no way, shape, or form. He's very good on camera, and he's very good at simplifying, I think oversimplifying many different times, the unwoke message for people to be able to understand in small bites. But my main criticism of him here is, so I'm doing this as a friend and as somebody who Chris followed me back when he had 10,000 followers on Twitter. We communicated over the last 3 years via DMs. We've communicated on many different ideas. His whole push for DEI right now, or to defund DEI, you can trace that back to conversations he and I had privately and through my work on DEI. But he has taken up that mantle, and he's got the bandwidth to make that an actual ordeal. So I am happy that he's doing that, even though he doesn't share credit well. But that all notwithstanding, what I'm going to do here today is I'm going to go through Chris's video, and I'm going to use Chris's arguments against Chris's assertions here that the WEF is, quote, irrelevant. I think what he does here is show a profound ignorance of the subject in his statements about the way this is all set up. And the concerning part for me is that he takes on the same arguments that were used against him to undermine the seriousness of the WEF and Klaus Schwab and that whole agenda and the direct effect it has on the United States of America. And the biggest part of that is that he completely glosses over what makes politics run in the United States. He glosses over completely what makes things move in politics, and that's money. Hello, Wikipedia snippet. How are you? Nice to see you this early in the morning. That's very nice. But money is a huge issue here, and he makes several assertions that I'll take through the video. that are patently false. And if he had more understanding of this issue from an in-depth level, because here's one criticism I have of Chris, is that Chris takes up narratives and issues fleshed out by other people, gets a surface to mid-level understanding of them, and then markets them and puts them on camera. And that has been effective in many different ways, but it's also harmed our movement in many different ways. And I think this will be a prime example of it. Chris Rufo undercuts the entire playbook that he used to legitimize critical race theory against the people who were calling it a conspiracy theory, or were saying it wasn't happening in schools, or saying it's not happening in universities. He uses the arguments that were used against him, against Klaus Schwab, and saying that they're irrelevant, saying that it's a conspiracy theory, saying that it is misguided. And one main thing that he does is that, another main thing that he does here is that he undercuts his own mechanism for defeating a policy initiative, or a idea initiative, or a cultural initiative. He undercuts his own tactics in how he did that with CRT. How did he do that with CRT? He pinned it to people who were patently ridiculous. Ibram Kendi is patently ridiculous. Robin DiAngelo is patently ridiculous. Many of people at the forefront of the woke movement are cartoon-esque caricatures of intellectuals. And Chris Rufo very effectively exposed those people and used that exposure of those people as being ridiculous to undercut the outsized influence that they have, or had, or still have in many ways, on culture, policy, and government. And he makes the inverse argument when it comes to Klaus Schwab and the WEF. He says that we shouldn't focus on the ridiculous nature of these individuals, that we should downplay who they are, and not use that caricature to show that this entire apparatus is pervasive and dangerous in a direct way right now, today, in the United States of America. And what I'm going to do over the course of this video, over the course of this live stream, is I'm going to show, by using the University of Oklahoma, the flagship university of the reddest state in America, to show that Chris Rufo is completely incorrect in his assessment when it comes to his assessment of the WEF and their influence on American life today and in the future. So we're going to dive right into this video. Please like, subscribe, share the channel. I would appreciate that. And again, this is all done in an academic sense. I'm taking on his ideas one at a time as he goes through. And I'm not saying he doesn't make any good points, but again, most of his points are inverting the exact arguments that were used against him when it came to CRT at the beginning, when it comes to gender ideology, or it comes to any of these type of issues that he has helped and played a very important role in showing the American people what's actually happening. And when I see that kind of thing happen, my mind automatically goes to the dialectic. And one thing you have to know about Chris Rufo is that Chris Rufo is being paid by the Manhattan Institute. Chris Rufo is being paid by people who are much richer than him. Some people there's a connection to the WEF. Now, I'm not saying that he's being controlled like a puppet. I'm not saying that he is a double agent actor. Yeah, I think you might be able to make a case for that. And I'm not going to call that assertion a conspiracy theory. I'm going to call it a hypothesis that I don't subscribe to. But this type of thing, hello Melinda, hello Mark, this type of reaction to this specific issue, because wokeness at its base is a manipulation. Okay? Wokeness at its base it's a manipulation of narrative. That's the postmodernism of it all. And as James Lindsay has said many times, as sovereign nations and Pastor, oh my gosh, I just blanked on his name, O'Fallon has said that there's a dialectic we're dealing with here, that to every action there's a reaction, and the synthesis of that reaction is supposed to be a predetermined solution, right? You have a thesis, an antithesis, and then a synthesis. The thesis is wokeness, right? And then you have really reactionary right Hegelianism coming from the right. And the predetermined solution seems to be wrapped up in this economic agenda, most prominently pushed by the WEF and Klaus Schwab. And you can see the tentacles of this agenda infecting Republicans and conservatives in the reddest state in the country, mainly through through our universities. And if there's another beef I have with Chris Rufo, it's that I was on him. I have tweets. I could show you receipts. As early as 2020, trying to get him to sound the alarm on diversity, equity, inclusion offices in universities who were taking over Title IX, who were taking over the systemic hiring in universities that led to what I'm going to reveal to you over the course of this video, which is the infiltration of the WEF agenda from a ground level, bottom up, vertical, top down, and bottom up system. DEI was a means to an ends. Just like defund the police was an effort to get DEI offices throughout the country, whether it's municipal or university or business. You've heard me say that if you've followed my channel. DEI was, or defund the police was merely a mechanism to justify, it was a thesis, to justify an antithesis, which was the reaction. To say, okay, you had George Floyd, for example. George Floyd, you had that thesis that cops were killing thousands of unarmed black men throughout the country, right? You have that as a thesis. The antithesis is, well, there's got to be something to remedy that, right? And a reaction to that. And then you have the predetermined solution, which in almost every case you go through, whether it's Minneapolis or Norman, Oklahoma, you go through, they instituted a DEI office in every single jurisdiction where they defunded the police as a mechanism to mollify the activists. And the DEI offices are used because of, guess what, Chris Rufo? Government funding, ARPA, ESSA, all of these other things, to get government grants to institute the WEF agenda as they outline it, and to institute those in research institutions like the University of Oklahoma to continue to push that agenda beyond, and I'm quoting here from OU's strategic plan, beyond the walls of the institution to influence policy, to take on environmental justice, to take on warfare, to take on social justice and spread that beyond the walls of the university through government, through money, through public-private partnerships. So let's go ahead. We're going to start here. I'm going to pull this. And I'm going to start kind of a little bit into the video. And I'm going to, as he talks, I'm going to highlight the arguments he makes that were used against him when it comes to CRT. I'm going to highlight his strategies and how he helped promote that and legitimize the notion of critical race theory in our country. I'm going to show you how in places like the University of Oklahoma and the state of Oklahoma, Republican lawmakers, conservative lawmakers have been swindled by this agenda and fooled in some cases and bought out in others to push the WEF agenda from the bottom up while the WEF is pushing it from the top down. And then I'm going to offer you video proof receipts of the bottom up, top down, from Klaus Schwab top down from the WEF, and bottom up from Norman, Oklahoma, the University of Oklahoma, the exact same agenda. And then I challenge Chris Rufo. Come on my show, I'll come on yours. He won't. You see, he thinks he's above my pay grade, even though there's a healthy amount of his work that I could trace back to my own talking points, even to the point where I could provide receipts showing where he asked me for scripts and the things that he said over the last 3 years. All of that notwithstanding, I would love to have a conversation with him. I respect the man. I think he's an incredibly intelligent person. I think he's an incredibly intelligent and effective communicator. But I think what he does with this agenda, what he does with this argument is just, it's bass backwards. It's literally using the fallacious arguments against this as a real situation that was used against him when it comes to critical race theory. So let's just start here. I'm going to play some of this. Hello, Melinda. Okay. Oh, you can't hear it? Hold on, guys. Let me make sure you can hear it. Thank you, Wikipedia, for I want to make sure that you can hear this. Oh, of course it's going to give me a problem. Let me just re-add it. And I can't really comment because you didn't hear what he said. Hold on. What he's saying here at the beginning, just so I can buy some time here while I'm trying to fix the problem, is his first insinuation is, why is Klaus Schwab and the WEF seen as a problem? And hold on, let's try this. Okay, now let me know if you can hear this, guys.
With the changing of the international monetary system, and of course culminating in NAFTA and then the WTO conflict in 1999 and the year 2000. This has caused enormous changes, especially in places like Youngstown, Ohio, where I spent a number of years on a documentary for PBS. I saw actually following along with the changing of the international monetary system, and of course culminating in NAFTA and then the WTO.
So the sound works now. So let's take us back to where we were. Sorry about that. And I'm going to start with him. Now, first of all, his whole attitude towards this at the very beginning is this is an insane idea that this should even be an issue. But I'll let him speak first.
WEF and has guided the WEF. He's published a number of thinking and their own dreaming. And this, of course, is led by a kind of cartoonish personality, a former professor named Klaus Schwab, who founded the WEF and has guided the WEF. He's published a number of books outlining his ideology, with the Great Reset being the latest, how elite global managers can lead the transition from COVID into this kind of world of living in pods and eating in bugs. But I think I'd like to sound a note of skepticism and suggest that actually this enormous investment from conservatives in the WEF narrative is really deeply misguided. It misdiagnoses the problem and therefore prevents us from taking actual concrete action. I think the first question is, well, why do people believe that Klaus Schwab is the evil mastermind behind the globalist agenda? The answer, I think, is that because people have deep and really meaningful anxieties about the changing in the global world since the end of World War II, following.
Okay, so he's saying that the reason why people are looking at the WEF is irrational. It's based out of emotion, anxiety. And I'll remind you what the dissenters to Chris Rufo, when he was bringing about critical race theory, said about him. They said the exact same thing. This is irrational. This isn't happening. You have a lot of anxiety about your whiteness and you not having any power anymore. Right? Just remember that. Remember all of the arguments that were used against Chris Rufo when it came to critical race theory as you listen to this.
Going along with the changing of the international monetary system, globalist agenda. The answer, I think, is that because people have deep and really meaningful anxieties about the changing in the global world since the end of World War II, following along with the changing of the international monetary system, and of course, culminating in NAFTA and then the WTO conflict in 1999 and the year 2000. This has caused enormous changes, especially in places like Youngstown, Ohio, where I spent a number of years on a documentary for PBS. I saw actually what it did to disrupt the culture, disrupt the social system, disrupt people's lives at a really fundamental level. And of course, they feel anxiety about this. This is understandable. There are real questions and criticisms of this order. But instead of dealing with those hard problems, there is an impulse, maybe even a natural impulse, to try to pin those anxieties on one concrete symbol.
Okay, here we go. So now, he's using the exact same argument that the woke leftists used against him when he brought up the systemic nature of critical race theory and its influence over people's thinking and over education and over businesses and over government. Right? And the anxieties of, well, you just don't want to lose your power because you're a white person or you're a man or you're patriarchy or whatever. And they accused him of doing the exact same thing by saying, you're just trying to pin all of that anxiety on this nameless, faceless, or this one entity or this one symbol, which was critical race theory. Am I wrong? No, that's what they did to him. That's what they did.
I am feeling this way. It's very difficult to comprehend all of these changes that influence you, but over which you have very little control. But you can say, well, it's really Klaus Schwab, the man who sometimes wears really this bizarre spacesuit, who speaks in this very Austin Powers-esque German accent, and says things or publishes things that are really, truly outrageous and idiotic ideas. Like, you will own nothing and you will be happy. So of course, he's an easy symbol.
What he does here is he uses the caricature and tries to make it a cartoon, right? And he uses the notion that you will own nothing, be happy, as if that's some outlandish thing that hasn't been said directly by them, but it's just one small, tiny little piece of the puzzle that is the WEF agenda. And he's using that to make it seem ridiculous and ignoring all of the rest of it, which includes critical race theory, which includes social justice that he's been fighting. You understand? So what I'm showing you here is that Chris is using the exact same kind of manipulation that was used against him, and I'm not saying manipulation, maybe the same rhetoric, let's just use that, to downplay the WEF and Klaus Schwab. Hey, Art, how are you? To downplay the WEF and Klaus Schwab. That was used against him.
To pin it on. But there's real problems with this line of thinking. And again, I see this everywhere. You see this ginning up of conservative grassroots emotion that is then
Wikipedia, it's not unwarranted ridicule. He's misplacing the ridicule towards a very small, tiny piece of, and that Wikipedia snippet asked, no, you need to ridicule this. And he makes this point later on in the video, that you need to ridicule it. But it's the ridicule of it that will make people see this agenda in their community today and push their elected officials to actually stop it, as opposed to ignoring it, which is what they're doing now because they're making money off of it. So that's a question. So let's just let him continue here.
Given symbolic resonance in this organization, in this single person, this line of thinking. And again, I see this everywhere. You see this ginning up of conservative grassroots emotion that is then given symbolic resonance in this organization, in this single person, in this kind of this imagining of this cabal of people coming from all over the world to plot your future.
Now, that is the exact same thing that people were saying when he was highlighting Ibram Kendi and Robin DiAngelo and Kimberly Crenshaw and Herbert Marcuse and all the people he touts. He's literally making the same argument about Klaus Schwab that was used against him. That's what he's doing here. And he's not doing it very effectively. And I'll show you how.
And so it's really ripe territory for this conspiratorial way of thinking.
Now, I just want to point that out. Instantly, I mean, he was called a conspiracy theorist about CRT over and over and over and over again. Right? Over and over again. He was called a conspiracy theorist about critical race theory. And here he flips this term, and he even calls himself out on it here in a minute, to diminish the influence of a world organization that has existed in the world since 1971 and is a brainchild of Henry Kissinger. And, Klaus Schwab hasn't been an active professor since the late 60s. He's been working at this, and the WEF has been working at this agenda. And you can see whether you're talking about sustainable development goals, whether you're talking about Agenda 2030, whether you're talking about the push to electric cars, whether you're talking about any of this, you can see the effects of the WEF agenda here now today. And he's downplaying it like, oh, these people are just insane. They just showed up on, just because you've just heard of them, that's when they started to exist. It doesn't make any logical sense what he's saying, because he obviously doesn't know the history of the WEF. Right? He doesn't know. And that's one of my main criticisms of Rufo. I want to point that out, is that Chris takes on issues oftentimes without having an in-depth knowledge of what it is he's criticizing. He got a great in-depth knowledge of critical race theory from James Lindsay, from Local Distance. A little bit tinier from me when it came to DEI. And he studied that for a long time as he was taking it on and as he started talking about it in public. This he just throws out, probably because somebody said, hey, you just need to go ways off. Right? And it's kind of ridiculous what he's doing with it, because he obviously doesn't know what he's talking about here. He doesn't know the history behind it. He pulled two things out of, about the WTO in 2099, which has no real bearing on what's happening right now in a real and fundamental concrete way.
The problem with this, there are some conspiracies all over the world to plot your future. And so it's really ripe territory for this conspiratorial way of thinking. So what's the problem with this? There are some conspiracy theories that I think are almost kind of folk pastimes. There's this great American tradition of conspiracies about the JFK assassination.
Like critical race
putting
theory?
aside whether they're true or not, they're almost a kind of harmless.
Putting aside whether they're true or not. See, this is what I cannot stand, and this just lays bare his lack of knowledge and an agenda. I think it lays bare an agenda to diminish this, because I'm going to tell you right now, there are a huge amount of Republicans in this country, and Oklahoma is probably maybe even the center of this, that have a vested economic monetary interest in the WEF agenda moving forward. When it comes to sustainable energy goals, when it comes to climate justice, when it comes to social justice, and all the things that the WEF has been pushing since 1971 in the world. This is what makes me go, well, Chris, are you really making your own decisions here? Yes, conspiracy theories, Melinda, are now conspiracy facts. And to use the JFK assassination after what's come out about that, we're still skeptical of that because I don't like unnamed sources. But guys, it's his whole line of attack here is just a little bit. It just smacks of the exact same thing that was used against him. And is his cognitive dissonance a little bit wanked? Can he not see it, or is he choosing not to? That's the question, right?
There are some conspiracy theories that I think are almost kind of folk pastimes. There's this great American tradition of conspiracies about the JFK assassination. And putting aside whether they're true or not, they're almost a kind of harmless academic or intellectual enterprise. But this is not one of those things. Great American tradition of conspiracies about the JFK assassination. And putting aside whether they're true or not, they're almost a kind of harmless academic or intellectual enterprise. But this is not one of those things. This is actually a problem for the here and now for three reasons. One is because
he's not saying that the WF is a problem here and now. He's saying that the critique and the use of the WF as a target is a conspiracy theory, and that conspiracy theory is a problem for the here and now. And he lays out why he thinks that.
It misdiagnoses the locus of control. It says, well, there's this faraway, shadowy conspiracy led by the man in the creepy suit, Klaus.
No, it's not a shadowy conspiracy. It's an agenda that you can see from your local community government all the way to the United Nations, all the way to the federal government, your state governments. And I'll show you how in a minute. I just want to point that out, is that it's not some shadowy thing. They're not shadowy. They lay out their agenda. And keep in mind that Davos takes in the leaders from all over the world and the country, state, local, national, all over the world. People who make decisions, and not just Democrats. Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, was at Davos. This is really makes me nervous about this, is that guys like Chris Rufo get in with Ron DeSantis, and I like Ron DeSantis, but or they shill for Republicans that I know are captured, because some of them are here in Oklahoma. And he will cover for them over verifiably false narratives to protect them. And he did this with OU Children's, the story I broke here that became big. He can completely mischaracterize that whole situation to make Governor Stitt look like he did something when he didn't. And, you know, I have it in DMs. Hey, man, can't you just take the win? And when I show him, no, I can't, because they've enshrined the term gender identity into law in the bill that you're touting as a fix. Guess what? After 3 years following me and taking information, he blocks me. That's a little bit off, guys. That's a little bit off. Sorry. And what ends up happening is when I criticize him, I get hit with barbs. Well, you're not a team player, or you're just trying to grift and I'm not getting anything from anybody in his audience by criticizing him. If anything, I lose followers. We have the same. He sits atop the hierarchy of our echo chamber. I'm somewhere towards the middle to lower middle of that echo chamber. I have a larger voice than most, but not near as big as him. And you must understand that he's criticizing people like Jay Lindsay and calling them conspiracy theorists. And throughout this whole video, he doesn't name him. But James has been pushing, rightfully so, and backing up his assertions with research. Just like he did with CRT, Chris took a lot of that research, put it on Fox News, and becomes Mr. Anti-CRT. And I'm just going to say this because what do I got to lose? Much of what Chris said came directly from James, and he got the credit for it instead of James. Sorry, it's the way it is. If you took the time and went back and looked at it, you could find it. But he's completely mischaracterizing this whole problem as being some kind of outlandish, shadowy conspiracy theory when it's not. It's right out in front of our faces. You can see it in your local government. Just like you could see CRT in your schools.
Schwab. So it says that is the locus of control over our own destiny, our own future as Americans, which is wrong.
Okay, he's saying that the locus of control, it takes it out of the... And I actually, let me just point this out. I agree with this in a certain point, is that focusing only on the WEF is a problem, because then it does make it seem like a caricature. But Chris doesn't take the next step and show that agenda is vertical. It goes from the top down and the bottom up at the same time. That the WEF agenda, whether it's climate justice, all that, is being moved at both directions. And the WEF can serve as the Ibram key of this issue. And he went after Ibram Kendi hard, just rightfully so. It was effective. And do you hear much out of Ibram Kendi anymore? You don't. He was made to look like a fool, because he was a fool. And he was made to look duplicitous because he was duplicitous. He was made to look dishonest because he was dishonest. You could do the same thing with Klaus Schwab and the WEF. They become a target, and then you say, here are the 5 points that the WEF is pushing. Can you find those 5 points in your local government, your state government, and your federal government? And who amongst your politicians in your local and state government and your federal government are pushing this agenda? That's exactly what he did with critical race theory. And he's saying that we should not do that with the WEF and this globalist agenda, which critical race theory is the S in ESG. And WEF, the World Economic Forum, is, ladies and gentlemen, ESG personified. And he's trying to remove this central beacon of what this agenda is and make it more muddy. And do the exact opposite of what he did with critical race theory. It seems to me that he's trying to bury the web, when with critical race theory he was trying to expose it. That to me shows Chris Where's your money coming from, man? Where's it coming from? Because this makes no sense. And you're a smart guy. You are a smart guy. Can you see that you're using the same arguments that were used against you, against this issue?
Second,
and against people like James Lindsay.
It prevents effective action. If you believe that Klaus Schwab is running the show, and then you're investing all of your proposed solutions into, overthrowing Klaus Schwab as the head of this global order, you're really creating ineffective action.
No, you're not. What you're doing is you're creating a figurehead to help you identify the agenda and expose it in your local government, in your state government. That's wrong. I'm just going to play that point again.
Overthrowing Klaus Schwab as the head of this global order, you're really creating ineffective action for creating meaningful change in people's lives here in your community, in your state, in your country.
No, what you're doing is exposing that agenda so you can create effective action. So you know what to fight against. So you know which politicians to expose and pressure to not take the monetary incentive to action this process.
And then third, I think most importantly, it creates and engenders this attitude of defeatism, of impotence, of feeling powerless, of feeling helpless. Because as you're pinning it at that one singular personality or that one organization or that one agenda, you're abdicating your responsibility for taking meaningful action in your own life.
That is, again, it makes no logical sense. What we had a problem with critical race theory or DEI or CRT or any of that stuff, right? All of that was getting people to understand, right, that this was pervasive throughout education, it's pervasive throughout business, it's pervasive in many different ways. And Chris was the architect of pinning that to people, to hosts on MSNBC, pinning it to Carlos Hill, pinning it to Ibram Kendi, pinning it to Robin DiAngelo, and using them as the example to simplify the agenda enough to expose it. And now he's advocating we do the exact opposite in this instance. And it doesn't, his last point here is point number 3, is abdicating your responsibility for taking meaningful action in your own life? No, information is power. Taking meaningful action in your own life is taking meaningful action in your government, in your local government, your universities, your schools. And you can only do that if you have the information. If you can say, look, what so-and-so here at Red State University is promoting is what Klaus Schwab is promoting at the world level, and identify those things by using the caricature of Klaus Schwab and the little bit ridiculousness of it to expose that agenda, and then translate that agenda down to your own area. It actually enables effective action in your own life. Because then you can point at them and say, you, mayor, you, governor, you, state senator, you, university president, are promoting the same thing that this evil guy up here is promoting. And then marry them together and say, prove me wrong. That's exactly what Chris did with critical race theory. This is patently false. This is patently incorrect. And it goes against everything that Chris used to make the fight against critical race theory effective.
Agenda. You're abdicating your responsibility for taking meaningful action in your own life, actually in those institutions that surround you locally, and then through your elected representatives in Congress and in the executive, which still have almost all of the power for charting the future of the country.
Still,
Klaus Schwab cannot impose his ideology on the...
This goes against everything he said about the CIA, the FBI. He's speaking out of two ends of his mouth on this issue. He talks about the bureaucratic apparatus of DEI in one breath, which is right, and then abdicates that notion as being a possibility when it comes to the WEF agenda. This is one of the most felonious, it's one of the dumbest things I've heard him say. Just being real with it.
United States. Klaus Schwab can only promote an ideology that is then deliberated by Congress, that can either be accepted or rejected by the House, the Senate, and the President of the United States.
This goes against, again, I just have to restate, this goes against his whole notion of DEI. It goes against his whole notion of critical race theory, that, oh, all of a sudden now all of the power rests in elected officials. No, what do we talk about the deep state for, Chris? Right? What do we talk about this stuff for? How can you assert that when it comes to universities and it comes to governments, when it comes to CRT and DEI, but you abdicate that when it comes to the WEF and an agenda that actually carries within it the things you are fighting? You've lost the plot, friend. You've lost the plot, and so you're calling some of the people that you got all of your information that made you successful in this space, that made people know your name, you're calling them crazy conspiracy theorists. People are going on about Crowder calling out, the Daily Wire. At least he had the guts to do it by name. Chris is doing it with shadow boxing with them under this notion of propriety, but he's calling them nuts. He's calling James Lindsay nuts. He's calling many different people nuts during the course of this video. He's calling them crazy. And because he's Mr. CRT, see, he's using his, I believe, in many ways, unearned influence in this space to influence people in a direction by using the exact same tactics that were used against him. That should make people second guess what he's saying. That, my friend, is wokeism. Because wokeism at its base is a postmodern manipulation. And you are using marketing tactics to point people away from something that they're starting to really understand because of Klaus Schwab, because of Davos, because of the WEF as an entity, and and expose that agenda for people to understand. Yeah, Art, we should chat about our state. I'm going to show you our state. If you're in Oklahoma, I'm going to show you. I've made videos about it that went viral, that mash up the University of Oklahoma DEI pushed agenda against the exact words of Klaus Schwab, verbatim.
It states. And so if you believe that Klaus Schwab is running the show, you are creating an attitude of implicit defeatism, cynicism, powerlessness.
That's completely wrong. What you're creating is a pinpoint, like Ibram Kendi, or D'Angelo, or any of these crazy people, to focus on, to expose the ridiculousness of their agenda and expose the details of the agenda so that people can take that picture and apply it to their local, state, and federal government.
And I was thinking about this, and I really think that what it signifies, at its heart, the real ugly psychological problem undergirding the conspiracy theory approach is that it betrays an inferiority complex. Logical problem undergirding the conspiracy theory approach is that it betrays an inferiority complex. It betrays a lack of a feeling of mastery over our own lives, over our own destiny as a country. And it says, no, there is a group of people assembling at a wine bar on the ski slopes of Davos.
The group of people include and have included President of the United States, presidents of the United States, secretaries of state, current governors of states, state officials, federal officials, bureaucratic officials, all the people that he said make the decisions in the country. And he's saying, oh, well, they go and sit at a wine bar in Davos. And they get marching orders. They say, we see all of these videos of things that are going on at Davos, but there are tons of meetings on that we have no privy to. This has made me lose some respect for him, because this is so blatantly manipulative and uneducated and ill-informed from an intellectual level, that you got to start questioning things. And the minute you call me a conspiracy theorist is the minute I, just like Chris Rufo did, start throwing receipts in your face.
That are charting my future for me. And maybe they're laughing at me, they're mocking me, they're contemplating my demise. I am merely a pawn in this larger scheme of these forces, which we can identify only abstractly, only symbolically.
No, we can identify them in our own state governments if we know the agenda. How do we know the agenda? We place a face on it. We identify the agenda, we transplant that agenda, we look for it in our own state and local governments, and that's it. That's what we did with CRT.
But we're convinced that they have our destiny in their hands. And so I think it's also a kind of inferiority complex among some folks in the conservative intelligentsia and the media, et cetera, that really should know better. Those of us, I think, who have a sense of the world for how it works, can identify that the WEF, for example, is not really the source of these problems. Okay. It's a reflection of these problems. It's a promotional vehicle for these ideologies.
Like Ibram Kendi
and it's something that, of course, gathers elites from business and other sectors once a year.
Government.
In my experience and my observation, not to plot the takeover of world institutions, but merely to distribute and confirm one another's social status and prestige. And so the idea is...
This is a complete mischaracterization of what Davos has done, of what the WEF has done, and what you can see in your own state and local government. This is where I look at Chris and go, you're being duplicitous and dishonest. Or you're just profoundly ignorant about this and claiming not to be. Either way, it's a distinction without a difference in terms of the result. And I'll tell you this, Chris is a Machiavellian. Look at his reading lists. His ends justify his means, or his means justify his ends. But this is patently false, what he's saying.
Is that, conservatives are outside these mechanisms of social status and prestige. We're outside the New York Times op-ed page. We're outside the kind of cocktail parties of Davos.
How long has it been since any conservatives cared about the New York Times or Washington Post or what? How long has that been? Nobody cares about that. They would rather be in the Daily Wire. They'd rather be on Fox News. They'd rather be, if you're talking about prestige, they're not looking to the left into the spectrum for prestige anymore. We're past that point, Chris. We are past that point. This is a straw man argument.
We're outside the prestigious awards like the Guggenheim Awards or the Genius Grants. Is in essence abdicating our own sense of meaning, abdicating our own responsibility of stewardship over institutions that matter, and then betraying an inferiority feeling, ceding these and really confirming their own kind of self-designated status. And if you think about World Economic Forum, the best description of it, in my view, is to say It was someone who used it as a promotional vehicle. I like to say that the WEF is not a conspiracy, it's a PR campaign. They do it all very openly. I think Klaus Schwab sees that the value of it is really in the...
I thought it was a shadowy government thing, but now you're saying it's a PR campaign and it's an open promotional video. Guess what? Chris, you have been a PR campaign for the unwoke movement that we very much needed at the time. That doesn't make you intellectually or I mean, you're influencing policy all over the country now. And you're just one guy with not near... The WEF has been in the world space since before you were born, Chris Rufo. Klaus Schwab has been at the helm of this institution since, you know, you were before you were a twinkle in your eye. This is completely disingenuous.
Promotional value, in the propaganda value, if you will, not in the kind of private value of any deal making or any...
Klaus Schwab has openly boasted about the number of people that they have influence over that sit in parliaments and Congress and in cabinets all over the world. And then you can verify that. Chris.
Collaboration that goes on at some of these meetings. And ultimately, I think we need to diagnose the problem accurately. We need to actually have a good theory of what's happening on these deeper issues in order to be able to take effective action. And so
what is that, Chris?
My own theory of the case, my own theory of how power works in these elite institutions that are, of course, transnational. These are people whom I met in my time, for example, at the Georgetown School of Foreign Service.
Oh.
You have the best and the brightest from all over the world. You're meeting the sons and daughters of the Sheikh.
Georgetown School for Foreign Service. I thought he was a documentarian doing documentaries for PBS, but he went to the... Okay. You take of that what you want.
In Saudi Arabia, you're meeting the sons and daughters of industry in the United States. You're meeting the sons and daughters of the Brussels NGO titans in Europe.
Politics is relationships, ladies and gentlemen. Politics is relationships. And what he's describing here is the mechanism for the WEF to be able to accomplish the goals within society through bureaucracy, through government businesses, necessary to accomplish their goals, which are plainly visible. Plainly visible.
All coming together to get this kind of education. But the real truth of the matter, in my view, is that these are at heart American ideas that are promoted by American NGOs, American asset managers like BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, and that are ultimately
the same people that are pushing ESG, right? And BlackRock, he in one breath said that it was a global and transnational issue, and now he's saying it's predominantly an American issue.
Adopted by predominantly left-wing American policymakers.
That's incorrect, because there is a giant cohort of neoconservatives and rhinos or crypto woke Republicans who are pushing this agenda while acting like they're the most, MAGA people ever. Oklahoma is the prime example of that. Go look up the Blaze's article on Governor Stitt in the 2030 agenda from Oklahoma. Captured. Absolutely captured. Yeah, Belinda. Fascism is the new American ideal since when? Since Marxism and postmodernism. Here's my intellectual moment for the minute. Was the thesis. Reactionary Machiavellianism from the right, Hegelian right, is the antithesis. This right here is protecting the synthesis, the predetermined solution. So all of the people that pay for him can make money. Take it for what it's worth.
And they're laundered through this institution of mutual kind of prestige giving at Davos or the WEF, translated into a kind of bland European internationalism by someone like Klaus Schwab, and then fed back into the American system. So they're legitimizing or promoting these ideas through the WEF, but the key 2 points, the origination of these ideas, and then the adoption of these ideas. They're promoting them to policymakers because they know ultimately in our constitutional system, these ideas have to be either accepted or rejected by Congress and signed into law or vetoed out of the law by American presidents.
And how do you influence them? Money. And I'm going to tell you, the energy companies that claim to be against all of this renewable energy crap are the ones pushing it. That's also disagree with Vivek Ramaswamy and his characterization of this stuff, who I, again, greatly respect and has done amazing work, is continuing to do amazing work. But energy companies are the origination of this, and nobody has more money than them. Nobody.
Presidents, they know that is the influence game. But rather than focus on the middleman, rather than focus on the symbol, rather than focus at the far away, I'd encourage all of us on the conservative side. Well, of course, criticism of ideas is important. Criticism of the ideology is essential. But we should focus on diagnosing the correct cause, the original cause, the proliferation of the American kind of NGO
so he's
complex.
Wrong about NGOs are no longer, they're all transnational. This is not a uniquely American problem, and the WEF prime example of that. And there are many NGOs that push the WEF narrative and take their cues that nobody knows about. We could use those same talking points to identify them if people actually focus on the WEF. If they use that as the model and say, okay, where can I find these exact same agenda items in what different companies in the United States or outside of the United States? Chris, I was a teacher. You make it simple. You give the examples. Here's A, B, C, D, and E. You find A, B, C, D, and E in another organization, in another politician's agenda. You expose that, and this is how you influence change in government. You either find the money to buy them off, or you shame them into doing something different. And the WEF and Klaus Schwab is a great way to shame them, just like Ibram Kendi was. Oh, you want to be in cahoots with the guy who said that the only remedy to discrimination is discrimination? Do you want to follow that logic? No, you don't. Well, here's your out. If you do, we're going to shame you because that's an idiotic notion. Okay, well, you want to be the person who's pushing, sustainable development goals and climate justice and social justice and health and equity and all of the things that Chris is about. Oh, Klaus Schwab is talking about that here? Well, here's the guy here at home that's doing it too. Let me connect him to Schwab. Shame him using Klaus Schwab into not doing that. Chris is trying to take away the exact mechanisms that help him expose and remove, in some cases, critical race theory in our society.
That spans the bureaucracies in corporations, in governing institutions, in nonprofits and philanthropy, and of course in academia and media. Focus on really disrupting and rebutting and dismantling those institutions to the best we can that originate these ideas and ideologies, and then focusing on the ultimate ends or the ultimate conclusion, the place where the actual rubber meets the road, power decisions are made. And this is political. Again, the WEF, Klaus Schwab, even the CEOs of our great asset managers and corporations cannot impose their ideology. And in fact, working through our legislators, working through our democratic process.
Well, Linda, this is a good question. The only thing that beats money is... I'm sorry. Talk about human nature. And shame may be a strong word for it, but forcing them into a position where if they support it as a Republican specifically, that they will be met with such an outrageous outpouring of outrage that it shames them into changing their position. There's only two incentives. There's the ballot box, and okay, if you do this, we're going to vote you out. Public and money. So 3 incentives in politics. That's it. So shame is what you've got in between elections, and if you don't have any money. That's all you've got. That's what happened in Loudoun County. And that school board. That's what Chris specializes in. PR, marketing, shame. Pointed at the right direction. Should be pointed at individuals who have no power. But those who are, if they do to create an influence mechanism in between elections and you have no money, PR. And PR is nothing but going to influence you using public relations and public sentiment to do something different than what you're being paid to do or bribing you to do or what you were going to do without anybody looking. So
we can eliminate the power of these ideas within our institutions through better legislation. For example, ESG. Congress could, if it had the will, right now,
if it had the will,
dismantle and disrupt and just.
If it had the will, it could, but it doesn't have the will. Why doesn't it have the will, Chris? Because people don't know, and you're trying to take away one of the biggest mechanisms to inform them. They don't have the money, and they don't have the PR. And you're trying to take away the biggest tool that got you famous, Chris, for fighting against CRT on this issue.
Destroy ESG ideology in America's companies. That is within our power. And by abdicating the responsibility and offloading our anxieties onto a figure like Klaus Schwab, we're doing damage to our own cause. We're doing damage to our own psyches, our own subjective feeling of agency or power. And we're doing damage to the country by not taking the action that will truly be meaningful. What is the action? And so I tweeted this. Of course, this is kind of controversial. I tweeted this earlier this week.
He's going to name drop and drop his own elitism and his own status to make his argument. After saying that the only thing that Davos was for was to do that. Just watch.
I had at least some confirmation. Elon Musk confirmed in his response to my tweet that this was a quite sensible position, although he remarked, and I think quite right, that the
What does Elon Musk sell? Cars. Electric cars in our society would not exist if it were not for the WEF. The whole idea was pushed by them going back decades to reach carbon neutrality. How was that done? Congress, Obama, money, and people not paying attention and not knowing the agenda. But go ahead here, Chris. Name drop yourself into
a quite sensible position. Although he remarked, and I think quite right, that the WEF is such a ridiculous organization. The ideas are so absurd. We should absolutely make fun of these folks. And I think that Elon is right.
We should make fun of them while exposing their agenda and applying it to the lower levels so people can be informed and use that when they don't have the money to influence public opinion against the agenda that the WEF represents. You're literally trying to take away the only tool that the common person has, Chris.
In his words, but it really reveals another tactic. I think he's even more right, and there's more wisdom in this, because ultimately the WEF and organizations like it survive when we buy in to their claims of social status, their claims.
The WEF existed. Nobody knew about it on the whole, like they do now, until now. And they've existed since 1971 and have had an outsized influence on what's happened in this country beyond what you can imagine, and are pushing for more.
Of being the elite disseminator of opinion, and by making fun of them, by mocking them, by exposing them as an empty organization with a ridiculous person that doesn't actually have any power over us, over our legislators, over our institutions. We can destroy that illusion, and we can go from an idea of inferiority to an idea of real superiority. Not on the basis that they establish, but on the basis that we establish. We, on the basis of American sovereignty, on the basis of American history, on the basis of American institutions, reject these kind of pseudo communities of places like Davos, Switzerland, and we're reasserting our authority as the American people. And then we're also going to kind of ridicule and mock you and expose you. I think that's a really good way to do it. So I think Elon Musk is
expose them without recognizing that they're the problem or the most visible aspect of the problem that people are identifying with. You out of two
is right aligned with us, and ultimately the solution to conspiracy theories is to align your theory with reality, so then you can act in the world in a way that matters, in a way that actually achieves your goals. It doesn't just fritter away your energy into a defeatist and maybe escapist psychological pattern.
18 seconds. And that's it. So Chris uses every argument that's been used against him and then defeats his own argument in the end of this video. Now I'm going to show you a video I made about the WEF and the World Economic Forum. And, well, let me just show you this. Hold on. I'm going to take you through it really quick. Let me share this screen. So I've laid this out because the University of Oklahoma has adopted the WEF and even quotes it in strategic research verticals. Their strategic plan for the university. And it's plain as day. It's plain as day. Let me find the video because that'll be easier, and I'm getting tired because it's 4 in the morning. But I can take you through this. I have other videos you can go look at for this, where I actually outline all this. It's the World Economic Forum, the University of Oklahoma. You should go and look at that. Plug my own video here. Oh crap! But this is just a 2-minute video that underscores exactly what this is, and I need to find it. So bear with me, guys. You're going to want to see this. Here we go. This is the longer form of the video, but that's fine. It's 7 minutes long. Watch this. I think you'll get the idea, and it shows the exact same agenda. It shows the exact same agenda. And in their words from Klaus Schwab and then from the VP and president of OU. Let me share this. Here we go.
What is actually the World Economic Forum? So the question is, what is actually the World Economic Forum doing? And of course, you all know or have heard about our annual meeting in Davos. But so that's only the tip of the iceberg.
So many watershed moments have transpired in less than a year and a half. The speed and utter devastation that has come from a once-in-a-century virus. The worst attack in our nation's capital since the War of 1812. Widening political divisions, exposing the fragility and preciousness of our democracy. A nation reckoning with systemic racism. What do these all have in common?
The World Economic Forum has created platforms to address those issues much more on a micro level. Academia, science, and I'm also proud that the World Economic Forum has a relationship with the University of Chicago. Actually, we have a community of 30 universities around the world working very closely with us and being engaged into our different activities.
I turn our attention to OU's Vice President for Research and Partnerships, my friend and my colleague, Tomas Diaz de la Rubia, the greatest man in research and higher education, and also the greatest name.
The World Economic Forum
and this is his global organization, his
very
NGO.
Often accused, or if I may use this word, as being, let's say, the mecca of globalists.
Soros,
what we are really doing is to manage to conceptualize, sometimes to catalyze platforms
like
to address
OU.
specific global challenges.
The verticals are those grand challenges that we at OU under this strategic plan are going to be tackling. Could you just tell our listeners and viewers your thought process and how you architected that strategy for research?
Yeah, I came at this from the perspective that, as a planet, as a society, we face tremendous challenges in the 21st century. We face global challenges for us today and for future generations that require us at universities to be creative, to be innovative, to identify opportunities to create solutions to these global challenges.
But what we also have to do is to complement what is done on a macro level, on a micro level, which means to address the manifold challenges in very structured and very purposeful ways.
And then we started quickly drilling down to what are those challenges and how do they map into Oklahoma, how do they map into the nation, and then how do they map into the world. And so we created a framework around that concept of global challenges that I think is serving the university well and is serving society very well. Also.
Well, it created a framework that we're now living by. Mm-hmm. Could you list what those grand challenges are?
Those verticals, which are aerospace and defense and national security.
The fourth industrial revolution will have a major impact also on warfare.
On warfare.
The future of energy.
Energy and environmental sustainability.
The future of health.
The life of sciences and the future of health.
If you look at health, there are so many issues, not just, let's say, medical issues, but social issues.
And society and community transformation. Those four verticals really represent the areas in which we as a university can focus, bring all our disciplines, all our colleges, departments, and expertise together across all the campuses of the university to truly tackle these grand challenges that are going to impact Oklahomans, that are going to impact the nation and the world.
It's not lost on me or anyone else that all of this progress has taken place during COVID, during 2 years of complete disruption.
Now, the fourth industrial revolution is not just a prolongation of this digitalization, it's much more. It's a combination of technologies. It's not just the digital technology. Just think of genetics, think of brain research, and so on. And the power of the fourth industrial revolution comes from the combination of all those technologies.
Yes, let me start with aerospace, defense, and national security. You know, the University of Oklahoma has tremendous assets, and you and I have talked about this. We believe that it is a role of a public university in the state, in the country, to help our warfighters, to help our military succeed in their mission.
What the fourth industrial revolution will lead to is a fusion of our physical, our digital, and our biological identities.
We have focused, because we're here in Oklahoma, we have focused strongly on the application of our radar capabilities that we have developed over the decades for
it's not just
predicting and understanding weather. We have taken those technologies and are now applying them to very important national security challenges.
Where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on.
It's also, as I said, helping us now transition those technologies and advance and develop those technologies to help our military against the major threats that we face from our adversaries.
The worst attack in our nation's capital since the War of 1812. Widening political divisions, exposing the fragility and preciousness of our democracy.
This again amplifies the fear of people who feel losing control, and then of course try to find protection in believing in more, let's say, populist approaches.
So that's what I got, guys. I mean, Chris is wrong. There's just no other way to put it. Chris Rufo is wrong. He's verifiably wrong, and he's using the exact same arguments that were used against him to try to prove he's not wrong. So, Chris, I invite you to come on my show. I'll go on yours. I'm sure you won't honor me with your presence and dare to lift my status by gracing my humble airwaves. But, friend, you're always invited. Friend that I've talked to for years now. Anytime. Come and prove me wrong. Come show how stupid I am. Please. I dare you. That's what I got, guys. We'll see you later. Like, subscribe, share the channel. Help me get this message out, because I don't have a billionaire funding my YouTube channel. All right, guys. See you later. Be watching. Stay UnWokable.